I was 13 years old when I stopped trick-or-treating. The other kids weren't so eager to give up free candy, but something happened that year. Something awful. My friends Owen, Drew and I were out tricking for candy when we came to a house that had a big bowl of it sitting on the porch. A sign above it read, "Please, take just one." We joked about swiping it all, but Owen and Drew only took a few each, enough to make them feel like badass kids. I'd always been afraid to take more than one because I was intimidated by authority. Sure, it was just a sign, and it usually meant that the owner wasn't home. But I was a timid kid who always did what he was told. Owen and Drew explained how that house did the same thing every year, and that people rarely saw the guy who lived there. They dared me to do what they were too chicken to, so I decided to see what it felt like to do something naughty. We looked around to make sure no one was watching, and I poured the contents of the bowl into my bag. The three of us ran down the street laughing and shoving each other. Part of me expected someone to chase after us. In hindsight, I was right to be concerned. At Owen's house, we dumped out and sorted all of our yummy treasures. I tried to offer him and Drew some of the contraband candy, but they refused. I remember Owen saying, "That's all you, dude," and Drew shouting, "I don't want your tainted treats." Granted, they weren't entirely serious, but I was annoyed that they weren't sharing in the responsibility, enough to go home instead of sleeping over. That night, I was torn from a sugar-fueled dream by a hand over my mouth and a knife to my neck. The skin was rough and the blade was ice cold. It was just slightly pressing into my skin, ready to slit my throat at a moment's notice. My body went stiff. I wanted to scream, but then a gruff voice whispered, "Don't make a fucking sound." At first, I didn't realize what was happening. Were we being burglarized? Then I got my answer. "Can't you read, you little shit? The sign said just one. Just fucking one." I'll never forget those words, and the sickening smell of his breath. He went on to explain how every year he would catch kids taking 2 or 3 pieces of candy, which always infuriated him. It wasn't until I took the entire bowl that he finally snapped. Why did I do something so stupid? I was terrified and humiliated at the same time. "You like candy, you little shit?" he asked me. So I shook my head as much as I could, despite his hand pressing against my face. He then removed it, still holding the knife to my neck, and proceeded to shove unwrapped candy into my mouth. I tried not to inhale, but I couldn't help it. I could feel things pushing against the back of my throat as I whimpered and drooled. I started to gag, but he put his hand back over my mouth so I wouldn't cough anything up. I truly believed I was going to die, and I feared for my friends as well. My short life flashed quickly before my eyes. All I could think in that moment was, how could an adult hate children this much? Everything I presumed about them was suddenly a lie. They weren't infallible, and their authority wasn't always law. Fine, so I took all this guy's candy. Did I really deserve to die? As I contemplated this for the first time, expecting to suffocate to death, my father rushed into the room, grabbed my metal desk chair, and beat the living daylights out of the guy. I never loved my dad so much as I did that night. I'm an adult now, and I live alone in a nice house on a quiet street with lots of kids. Every Halloween, I leave a basket on my front stoop, full of candy, with a sign that reads, "Take as many as you want." The dusk air was clogged with the scent of deep-fried food. The air clouded with the exclamations of hundreds of happy carnival goers as they sped through rides with reckless abandon. It was the perfect evening, the joyous atmosphere filling the hearts and minds of everyone there with enough fun to last until their next adventure. I couldn't help but smile, my brightest, widest grin. It was the season of carnivals, fairs, and outdoor festivals. The sweet smell of cotton candy washed over the land like a flash flood. The bright emerald of the eye swept over the masses, spying large, overstuffed animals bobbing through the crowd as children and adults alike totted their prizes through the fairgrounds. Everyone here, tonight, was a child at heart, including myself. Spying one of my favourite carnival treats, the funhouse, I giddily trotted over towards the old converted trailer in search of those infamous mirrors and cheap pranks. My friends had all gone in search of their favourite greasy fair delicacies, leaving me to my own devices. While I disliked going on most of the rides by my lonesome, I could more than handle the various mysteries inside the funhouse. After all, they were mostly geared to scare children. Most of them I had seen a million times, and at most provided me a chuckle or two. Once in a while something would jump out and startle me, but even then the prank was met with laughter. It was a funhouse after all. I dug a few tickets from my pocket, taking inventory as I read the sign outside the old trailer. A young Hispanic man stood by the door, his smile only broke by a sip from his fresh ice-cold lemonade he held in his right hand. As people entered, he would smile and nod, placing their tickets in his pocket. It was 5 tickets to enter. I had exactly 7. What a fine way to end my magical night at the fair. Passing the little light blue squares of paper off to the vendor, I merrily stepped up the stairs and into the dark interior of the large refurbished trailer. I had to blink a few times to adjust my eyes to the light. Pausing for just a moment, I pulled the length of my long red hair back over my shoulders and secured it with the purple hair tie from my left wrist. I was ready to have some fun, all by my lonesome. As I began down the tiny dark corridor, I could hear the echoes of the people who entered before me chuckling and squealing. I heard a couple up ahead, the woman giggling like a schoolgirl after her boyfriend, our male counterpart, I should say, instead of making assumptions, let out a frightened cry. I quietly uttered a chuckle. Men usually seem to be the biggest chickens when it comes to these types of thrills. As I rounded the first dark corner, I was met with my first scare. An old prop of a hanging man flew out from the way, its limbs frailing about limply from the sudden jolt that had forced it from its place in the wall. I jumped, my body flooded with an anxious tingling that seemed to dissipate out through my fingers and toes. I chuckled, pushing the dummy aside as I headed further into the funhouse. There was something odd, as my fingers had pushed against the prop. It had felt slightly warm and gooey. Great effects. Perhaps they had actually put some effort into things this year. After another couple of feet, a ghastly glowing sheet came flying across the ceiling, accompanied by the familiar ghostly sounds Hallowe'en had made famous. My green sights followed the sheet until it disappeared into a back wall. Without a second thought, I made my way further down the hall. Before long, I came to another corridor, my face almost meeting the black wall rather abruptly, if not for my toes hitting the painted cardboard. I blinked, squinting for a moment to gather my bearings again. It was easy to get lost in places like this. The black interior and lack of lighting leaving you disoriented and easier to spook. Before I had time to recover from my encounter with the wall, there was a horrifying shriek, followed by another cheap prop dislodging from the wall. I let out a squeal of surprise, falling back onto the floor as the dummy swung back and forth in front of me. It had several flashing green LED lights scattered around it in odd places. I chuckled as I plucked myself back up off the floor. I gave my butt a rub or two, my cheeks a little sore from the tumble. It was nothing big, especially not compared to the thrills I was getting this time around. I started off again, the dummy having the same warm, gooey texture as the last. This time, however, my fingers came away wet. I frowned a bit as I wiped them off on my jeans. Probably glue from those little dollar store LED lights. Perhaps the vendor could offer me some wet wipes afterwards. It would only be right, since it was their sloppiness that had caused it. There were several more props that dislodged from the dark walls, their little trapdoors squeaking as they popped open to spit out some thrills. Various pained cries, shrieks, and Halloween sound effects echoed through the halls. I couldn't hear any more people in the trailer. They must have all made it out already. I was having a blast, my voice bouncing through the darkness with chuckles and squeals. I hadn't thought twice about the grotesque creativity used in the props, most of the dummies appearing rather lifelike in the dark. To me, they were simply an improvement to the same old funhouse spiel. It was nice to see some effort being put into this carnival classic. After about 5 minutes I came to a door, my hands finding the knob before I even realised what was in front of me. I attempted to turn it, but it wouldn't budge. Frowning, I furrowed my brow in frustration, removing my attention from the door. I felt my way around the hallway around me, running my fingers along the black walls. There didn't seem to be another way through. Maybe it was just jammed. I leaned my body on the door, my hands furled as tightly as I could around the little handle. I noticed something strange when I pressed up against the door. There was a low mechanical hum coming from behind the door. I paused, pressing my ear to the black entryway as I listened intently for any other sounds. Perhaps it was the generator outside that powered the entire funhouse. Shrugging it off, I lifted a little sigh of disappointment as I realised the door wasn't going to budge. I'd take a wrong turn, obviously. Prepared to turn around and shuffle my way back to find the correct path, I slipped on something wet on the floor. Immediately, my stomach churned as my mind raced to assumptions. Somebody had probably thrown up in here, either from fear or intoxication, and had just stepped in it. Disgust rushed through me, quickly dispelling the heavy vibe that had followed me around all evening. What a great way to end the night. Now, focusing more on my surroundings, I began to notice the smell. It didn't reek of vomit, but rather it was a bitter, metallic smell. Oil from the generator? No, it was a little different, more bittersweet. I scrunched my nose before heading back down the corridor. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. I had to be close to the end by now. I had a sudden desire to go find my friends and head back home for the night. My fun had been ruined by someone else's bad luck. At least, I wasn't the only one who had wandered down the wrong tunnel. Dragging my fingers along the walls, I searched for another passage. It only took a moment or two before my fingers slid around a corner to my right. I don't know how I managed to miss it before, but I hurried, turned the corner. My face smacked right into another prop as I rounded the corner. I shrieked with a sudden shock, my body instinctively falling back away from whatever it was I had just ran into. As I glanced up towards the source of the thrill, several LED lights flickered on and off behind it. One of those cheap Halloween sound effects blaring in the background. What I saw in those few short-lived green flashes horrified me. This time, I got a good look at the dummy. Almost every last inch of its frame covered in what looked like blood. From the chest, down into the stomach cavity was torn open. Fresh, sausage-looking guts poured out onto the floor. It hung suspended by its neck from the ceiling. As I sat there, on the floor, another bright green flash erupted behind it. It was then that true terror struck me. Terrified eyes rolled down towards me, peering down directly into my own. That was no dummy. Completely encompassed by the sudden onset of fear, my body went into overdrive. As my limbs began to flail beneath me in an attempt to get up, I began to slip in blood that had pooled on the floor. My heart beat feverishly against the walls of my chest, my breathing flying out of control as I began to drown in my own panic. All of those dummies, those props, they were real. I began to whimper as it all began to sink in, digging my heels down into the floor the best I could. I pushed myself back, crowd walking back down the corridor in search of an exit. Losing track of time, I crawled back frantically through the dark hallway of what seemed like forever, until I felt it was safe to turn around. I wanted out of that freakish house of horrors immediately. That was no fun house. Rolling around onto all fours, I became horribly aware of the racket I was making. How long had I been whimpering? Had someone heard me? Paralysing fear threatened to break down the door to my subconscious as I crawled on all fours back the way I had come. I needed to get out of here, immediately. Whoever was killing people might still be in here, and I didn't want to meet them. At long last, I saw a brightening of the black, heavy-duty cardboard walls of the funhouse. I gasped a sigh of relief, hot tears beginning to pour down my face as I hurried towards the exit. Sunlight became more apparent as I crawled, its weak glass rays fighting for its life against the twilight. There was shuffling behind me now in the corridor, and a low scraping sound. I whimpered loudly, my voice jagged with pure horror. I was almost out of this place. At last, I reached the door from which I had entered. Throwing my hands out the door, I curled my fingers over the door jamb to thrust myself towards and on down the stairs. As my body rolled onto the grass, a loud cry of frustration echoed from inside the trailer. I didn't waste any time, rolling onto my stomach and pushing myself up onto my feet. Again, my emerald eyes rolled along the crowd, their terrified faces gawking at me as I rose to my full height. I didn't wait. I didn't stop. Breaking out into tears, I pushed through the crowd, leaving bloody handprints on t-shirts and bare shoulders. I wanted to get out of there right now. When I finally found my friends, they all gathered around me in an effort to comfort my trembling frame. By then, I was uncontrollably crying, my salty tears leaving streaks in the bright red blood from the funhouse. Security had already been called, and it took them very little time to find me. They had stormed the funhouse, quickly discovering the grisly remains of 11 people. The culprit had yet to be found, but they were scouring the grounds as they questioned me. I only half listened. The crowd of hundreds of people and their oversized stuffed animals suddenly terrified me. One of them, any one of them, could have been the culprit. On Halloween of 1988, 6 teenage boys ventured into a tunnel on a local railroad. Only one escaped with his life in a photo. What resulted from that innocent venture was a 2-year period of unexplained murders which killed off a good 10% of my small town's population. To this day, no one knows the true fate of the 5 boys and the reason behind the murders that lasted until the fall of 1990. Except for me. I'm the lone survivor of the 6 who encountered the Wanderer on the tracks on that dark Halloween of 1988. It was supposed to be a simple dare, nothing to it. Everyone had heard of how every Halloween people head into the tunnel and never come out. We all thought it was bullshit. Then again, we were only 14 and not very well learned in the way of the paranormal. All we expected was just some crazy dude in a bedsheet. However, what we found was much worse. And what we did made the outcome 10 times worse than it could have been. I guess that curiosity killed the cat really fits when remembering this story. It was me, Steve, John, Andy, George, Bill and Fred. Explaining our choice of costume is irrelevant. However, let us note that we all brought flashlights and Andy had brought a bucket to collect candy in. Foolish Andy. I remember your death so vividly it haunts my dreams to this very day. And she does too. but not for long. We all had dinner at John's house, as it was the closest to the tunnel. After that, we played some Super Mario Bros. As his Nintendo to pass, until it was dark. When it was, we all departed to complete the dare we so foolishly accepted. I carried a Polaroid to show everyone what was really in the tunnel. We left when it was considerably dark outside. Most of the dads were parading their 7-year-olds up and down the street getting candy before it got really dark. There had recently been some kidnappings in the area, but we didn't expect to meet the suspect, so we thought we would be safe. With each step towards the tunnel, it seemed as if it got darker, and when we arrived there, it was pitch black, and it was pretty much only us and the older trick-or-treaters outside. We all stopped at the entrance of the tunnel for a moment, realising that we may not make it out alive. After waiting one more moment, we hesitantly stepped inside, turning on all of our flashlights. No one really wanted to do this. We felt this more and more as we went deeper into the tunnel. It was weird though. Usually a tunnel ended around 500 feet, but it seemed like this one went on for miles. We went on for what I want to say was another 3,000 feet. That's when we saw it. At the time, we had no idea what it was. If I had a choice, I would wish that I had never found out what it was and what it did. "The fuck is that?" Bill asked, half whispering to the rest of us. What we saw looked like a girl that had covered herself in dark paint or makeup and had on a plain old nightgown. She was holding what looked like a rod, or staff. Her back was facing us. "Beats me," Andy shrugged. "Hey!" He yelled at the thing before throwing the bucket at it. It climbed up the creature and rolled to the right of the track. Suddenly, it made the most gruesome noise in the world as its head rotated 180 degrees to stare back at us. I hastily took out my Polaroid and shot a picture of it. I put away the camera and shook the developing picture before putting it inside my pocket. Everyone was frozen in place, looking at the creature, seemingly paralysed. Soon, the creature lifted the rod and threw it at Andy. It was horrifying and amazing, seeing it throw what we now knew was a spear with such dexterity, as well as doing it backwards. The spear struck Andy in the chest, dead centre in the sternum. His ribcage collapsed and blood spread from the entry and the exit. His spine snapped, and he crumbled to the ground. The blood-spattered spear was stuck in the ground a good 40 feet behind us. It was only a moment before we actually thought to run. We didn't even try to save Andy. I turned my head and saw the creature ripping open his chest, tearing muscle and organs apart as our dying counterpart screamed in his death throes. It seemed like the creature wanted to separate flesh from bone, as that is exactly what it had done. Andy's flesh and innards were scattered around his skeleton in a pool of his blood. It was coming for the rest of us now. Bill was the next one it caught, eviscerating him in the same manner as it did to Andy. Then she got George, and then Fred. It was me and John left. The creature was so close we could feel its putrid breath on our necks. We both heard its demonic growls and screeches as we just barely escaped its furious grabs for our costumes. We kept on running, even though the lactic acid had built up so much in our arms and legs, and our breath was ragged, and we were so damn tired. Soon, we saw the end of the tunnel. Somehow it was morning, which was so illogical, but John and I were both happy to see the light of day. Suddenly, I heard a trip and stumble. John had fucking tripped. We were outside of the tunnel and he tripped. I didn't even need to turn my head to know he would be gored and gutted. I ran a safe distance away behind some trees near my house. His screams echoed through the neighbourhood and awoke several families. Wandering outside to see what was happening. Everyone who went outside also saw the creature as it tore apart John. When it was done, it swept its eyes across the shocked citizens of my small town and let out a deafening roar that no man or animal could create. It then dashed back inside the tunnel and everyone ran inside their homes, including me. For 2 years after that, The people who saw the creature were found disemboweled and skinned in their homes. Some people tried to move, but I heard them say it was like they were chained here. The creature was holding everyone here, keeping everyone who had seen it captive in this town. I'm the last surviving person who saw the Wanderer on the tracks, and my time is coming soon. How did I last this long? I don't know. I bet it's teasing me, torturing me, making me shit my pants every time I turn a corner. It's taken a hold of my life, and I can no longer function like other people. I can no longer go out in the dark. My windows are always closed, the blinds always down, the doors always locked. I've tried to kill myself multiple times, but I can't. It won't let me. Recently, I've been hearing the dying screams of my dying friends. I've heard a bucket clanging from outside my window, tapping on my front door at night. It's a sign. It's coming for me soon. Well, hello there. It's a beautiful time of year, isn't it? Halloween. A time for candy, spooks, and horror cheer. I love every second, minute, hour, and day of it. Anywho, I have a story for you, little boys and girls. It's about a little boy by the name of Zane. He is a boy of muted speech, meaning he rarely speaks. His eyes are a grey sort of pigment, which makes him the odd one out. Different, if you must. His hair is the most unique feature about him. His hair is a silver tint, not shoulder, but just below his earlobe length. He was a little bit tall for his age, reaching about 4'8". His weight was below average, being 28.2 pounds. Our story starts off in a large-scale town, known by the name of Jamestown. A very cliché name, no? Zane was considered strange in this town, of outgoing and normal outlooks. He was shunned when he was first tried making friends, like the local kids surrounding his home and other hangouts. Let's start our story with Zane at the bus station, going to school. It was about 7:40 as he stepped onto the bus. He observed the seats, looking for an open seat where he could sit next to another, hoping to be accepted. As he stepped forward, a small, little blonde, by the name of Esmeralda, moved her bag to the empty space next to her, exchanging a rather rude scowl to him. Zane continued down the alley of the bus, looking for another seat. A rather big boy named Henry led his feet into the empty space on his seat, laughing at Zane and speaking in a rude voice, stating, "This is a normal kid's seat only, freak." Zane looked at him with an emotionless look as he shrugged and continued down the alley once more, in search of a seat. He finally found a seat at the back of the bus. It was a one-person only seat, and surprisingly, it was not occupied. He quickly set down his small, slightly ragged backpack on the ground as he took the seat. Noticing it was slightly uncomfortable, he stared out of the window as the bus drove on through the town, finally reaching the school building, Jamestown Elementary School. He stepped out after the kids ahead of him. He noticed they were discussing his looks and giggling at him, mocking him. He examined the school building and saw it was almost brand new. It was an elementary and high school mixed building. One end was for the majority of elementary kids, and the other for high school students. He walked in and noticed the wide hallways, wooden doorways into the classrooms, and not to mention the small brown lockers standing at each side of the hallway. He walked to one with his name on a small cutout piece of paper in black Sharpie. He put his bag in the locker, taking out his pencil bag and 2 notebooks, one for his drawings and one for classes. He closed it and slowly made his way to the class. It was a normal first day, besides the fact the two kids that he met on the bus relentlessly tortured him. They went from kicking him in PE, to pinning him on the ground and stuffing his mouth with rocks, shoving his food tray in his face at lunch, to even catching him in the bathroom as they shoved his head into the urinals. Cian was a muted and unusually civilized boy. But one day, a side of him emerged that he never had before. Love. Cian met a little girl named Mia. She was a short girl with dark hair that passed her shoulders. Halfway down her back, her eyes glowed a shade of green that shone like a newly shined emerald. She was the kindest to Cian, despite his features and muted nature. Mia and Cian spent a lot of time together. Mia talked to Cian about her pets, her parents, her favourite music and hobbies, and she never minded his muted nature. In fact, she found it kind of cute. They even reached a point of friendship that could be considered love. They began to hold hands at lunchtime. Cian sat with her on the bus, and he even went over to her house once to play. Cian felt helplessness, an emotion he thought was non-existent inside his mind. They both had a special area, the town park. It was on the southeast side of town. Mia and him would play there, as well as sit under the big slide, playing games and just talking. He was a sort of loner. He didn't like to be around people, but with Mia, Cian felt a sort of closure, a paradise within her voice and eyes. One day, when he spent the day at her home, she met him outside before he left. She smiled and hugged him, then kissing his cheek softly, which made him blush for the first time. He smiled. He smiled as big as the moon in the midnight sky, it seemed like. She giggled at this and told him that she'd see him in school the next day. She ran back inside her home as he walked home, as happy as he had ever been in a very long time. But the next day, Cian learned of another emotion, one side of him that could cause damage. Anger. Cian went to meet Mia at her house as he usually does, but she never showed. He waited and waited and waited some more. No sign of her. He walked to school, and along the way he saw her, sitting on a bench at the bus station, with another boy. He looked to see who it was. He felt a pain cross his heart as he saw Henry sitting beside her, holding her hand, talking to her as if they were deeper in love than she and Cian were. He walked over to them, Mia finally noticing him standing near them. Cian felt tears well up as he dropped his bag. Mia began to stand, but Henry laughed and stood up, walking to him. Henry stood right in front of him, smirking at Cian's sorrow. He spoke with a very tough and purposely hurtful voice. "You thought she loved you? Freak. She never loved you. She only hung out with you to make you feel better. The real thing here is that she loves me, not you. You little skinny freak of nature. You couldn't attract a girl unless she was blind, deaf, or just plain stupid." Cian heard this. He heard it well. His heart thumped hard. His head swirled with emotions. He noticed Mia was standing behind Henry, looking very guilty. He felt a warm sensation raise in his chest. His heart thumped faster, harder. His eyes began to open as his breathing quickened. His hands balled into fists. Henry laughed some more, as he knew. Oh yes, he knew he was getting to Cian. However, his mistake was that he thinks Cian wouldn't hurt him. Cian quickly lunged at Henry, knocking him down as he pressed his hands at his throat, his anger controlling his movements. Mia started screaming at Cian, pleading him to stop this, to stop hurting the one boy that's been treating him the worst since he moved here, the one boy he thinks he can take his girl, away from him. No, no. Cian pressed harder as Henry grasped desperately at his wrist, trying to pry him off of his throat. Mia stood there, terrified. Cian felt Henry begin to lose air. Henry slowly began to turn purple, the air circulation not having access to his lungs. Henry's eyes began to close, slowly. His eyes began to lose their grip. Henry took one last look into Cian's grey eyes. Within a few seconds,
Henry was gone. His heart quit beating, his breathing stopped. Cian, sitting over his body, observed the boy that he just took the life from. He looked at Mia with cold eyes. Cold and bloodthirsty eyes as he stood. He still had hatred delving within his heart. His very soul was drenched in the hatred that blinded his common sense. He walked towards Mia, as Mia stood in fear. Cian's mouth turned into a slow smirk, a smirk of revenge. He loved Henry more than him. She double-crossed him. She betrayed his heart. He began to chuckle. His voice was demented, deeper than an average 8-year-old boy. His laugh was a very disturbing laugh, a few cracks of his vocal cords along with the laugh. Mia couldn't move. Fear struck her and kept her standing still. Cian finally reached arm's length of Mia as he held a finger up to her lips, shushing her as he laughed some more. She began to weep in fear of what he'd do. He stopped laughing, but his smirk remained. After a few seconds of complete silence of the movement, he spoke very softly in a whisper. "Betrayer, thy punishment is death." After this, she screamed. He took a quick swing of his hand, whacking her in the side of the head with an inhuman force and silencing her scream. She fell to the concrete, unconscious, also leaving a blood gash in the side of her head. He laughed some more as he observed his first victim and his heartbreaker. He grabbed the collar of Henry's shirt and lifted him over his shoulder. After this, he grabbed Mia's ankle, beginning to drag her unconscious body along as he walked down the concrete path, to surely what would be Mia's demise, as well as Cian's disappearance from this dreadful town. Mia's and Henry's parents both called the police. No one found any trace for days, but soon enough, they checked the place they should have checked first off, the bus stop. They spotted a trail of dried blood along the concrete sidewalk. This led to the park. What they found was a terrifying sight. Mia was strung up by her arms, both outstretched as if she was Jesus on one of the crucifixes religious families hang in their kitchens. Her eyes were closed, her arms and legs were cut, the cuts forming words like liar, betrayer, and heartbreaker. One last gruesome detail was at her chest. It was cut open. All of the organs seemed to be there, except her heart. Her heart had been removed from her body. Instead, it was replaced by a balled-up piece of paper. When authorities opened it, it was a drawing of what seemed like a small child. The child had grey eyes, silver hair, and what seemed to be an almost demonic smile spread across his face. In his outstretched hands contained a drawing of a heart, protruding blood. Finally, at the top of this very disturbing drawing was a sentence written in what seemed like blood. It read, "Love is a lie." Authorities were baffled, but the child in the photograph was never seen, never heard from. Kids told him it was a boy named Zane. Same with the teachers. They never caught the little boy. His vengeance was brutal. But moral of the story? Never betray one's feelings. Never take more than what you need. One is enough. One is most definitely enough, kids. It's amazing, really. Halloween, that is. Just the idea of it. Humans, we're intelligent creatures for the most part, but during this certain time of year, we seem to lose said intelligence. We crave the need to be scared, spooked, and terrified. I myself used to be one of these people, until that Halloween, 3 years ago. Now, growing up, I searched for anything and everything that would scare me. The feeling of being scared intrigued me. That rush of blood from your heart to your head. The sound of blood pounding in my ears. My family seemed to travel a lot now that I think back on it. One town to the other, state to state. I still don't know why we did. We weren't militarily involved. My dad wasn't a travelling salesman, and he wasn't a performer.
I guess my parents just didn't like to be in one place for too long. They were free spirits. Or so I thought. Halloween was a weird time for us. My father was just like me. He loved being terrified, even more than me. He even tried being a daredevil for a short amount of time. My mum, now understand, was one of the happiest people I've ever come to know. She was so nice and gentle. But, for one night out of the year, she changed this pale, ghostly image of a woman, drained of all colour and life. She always looked scared, constantly looking over her shoulder, like something was following her. God, I miss her. It feels like an eternity since that fateful night. It started out like most Halloweens, my dad informing me of all the haunted houses we would be visiting, and my mother was her usual pale self. As the day progressed, though, my mum began to look increasingly worse, like the life was sucking out of her. Her cheekbones were sunken in that of a Holocaust victim, as if her skeleton was trying to rip free of the skin that it held it. I just shrugged it off as usual. That was my first mistake. As my dad and I stepped into the cool autumn air, I felt the wind bite into my cheeks and turn them red. As we walked to the car, I saw my dad fall to his knees. I quickly ran to his side. His face was that of my mother's, pale and bony. He was grasping at his chest and looking around, swiveling his head violently. I asked him if he was okay. This seemed to snap him back to normal. He hastily replied that he was okay and we needed to get going, so we didn't have time to wait in a long line. Too bad we were never made it to that damned haunted house. As we drove, the colour in my dad's face returned, but he still looked scared. I asked what had happened. He just replied that he had heartburn. I, again being carefree self, shrugged it off. As we turned off the main highway onto a side road that I suppose was meant to take us to the haunted house, I felt a sudden chill creep over me. We hadn't been on the road for 5 minutes before I saw headlights. It was an 18-wheeler for some local supermarket whose name is lost to me. Now, at this point, a lot of things happened at once. Something or someone ran out in front of the truck. The truck swerved into our lane. My dad swerved, while we clipped the truck and went spiralling into the woods that surrounded the road. Pain. That's all that came to mind after these events happened, and the loud rumble of an explosion, from what I suppose was the truck that almost killed us. My leg was caught under the caved-in dashboard. I was able to squeeze it out, but this only intensified the pain. I assumed I had a broken leg, or at the very least, a major fracture. I observed my surroundings. The car was slammed up against a tree. The front end was basically non-existent. There was smoke cascading up in the distance, with a faint glow of what most likely was the truck on fire. In the midst of this silent chaos, my dad was nowhere to be seen. As I dragged myself out of the car, I noticed something. I couldn't see the road. It wasn't there. I mean, it was as if the road had never even existed in the first place. I don't even remember how I reasoned it out of my head, but again, like I did everything, I shrugged it off. As I hobbled over to my dad's side, I saw that the door was ripped off and thrown at least 15 yards to the side of the car. There was a clear path, though, outlined in the weeds by blood and ripped pieces of clothing. Had someone dragged my dad to safety? I remember thinking this. It was the only logical thing, unless he dragged himself. But why would he do that? I followed the trail for what seemed like forever, almost losing it a few times, like he tried to walk at some point, but gave up. After what felt like forever, the woods gave way to an opening. There, before me, lay a cemetery, but there was something different about this cemetery that was different from any I had ever seen. I felt a rumbling underneath my feet, like the dead were resisting the holds of their earthly prison. The tombstones had no names, but were wrapped in chains. Standing in the middle was a figure. It was dressed in black. Beside him lay my father. I called out to it then. It turned its head towards me. What I saw I cannot describe, because its appearance did not stay the same for long.
1 minute it was a skeleton. Next it was my friends, then my relatives, then a snarling beast whose name I know not. He then spoke. His voice was hollow yet commanding. It gave me a feeling that I can only describe as hopelessness. He told me that my parents had committed great crimes. When I asked him what my father had done, he said that he had made a deal that helped him cheat death, and that he had been running from it since then. I stood there, still pondering on whether or not this was a dream. I heard an anguished cry gurgle off from my father. Silence. My father was nowhere to be seen. The dark figure sank into the ground, and with him went my sanity and consciousness. Darkness overtook me. I awoke on the sidewalk next to my house. My mother was gone. The house was cleared out, and nobody even remembers me or my parents. Now here I am in this hospital, with the only person in the world I love, my darling wife, Rose. Please take heed of my story, and know you cannot cheat death. There, honey, it's done, I said to Rose soothingly. Thank you, baby. That must be the doctor. I walked over to the door, and there stood the doctor in his freshly cleaned bone-white jacket, looking very similar to a ghost. Tom, I know times have been tough for you and Rose, and over these past years, I feel like we've all become good friends. So, it kills me to tell you. It seems the cancer is terminal. That word, terminal, it echoed throughout my mind. It resonated through it like the sound of glass shattering. I understand, I said back. I understand this is hard. I'll give you two a bit to discuss. I turned back into the room and started to walk to her bed when I heard another knock. I backtracked to the door and opened it. I saw a man of average height, grey pinstripe suit and a black fedora. His eyes were icy blue and chilled me to the bone. He looked me in the eyes with a piercing stare and said, "Wanna make a deal?"
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.